So folks, welcome to the September issue of the Mid-Atlantic Logger Training monthly webinar series. And we'll go through a few housekeeping issues here in a second, but today or this evening's program is going to be about combining deer and forest management. We sometimes don't always think about those things as working compatibly, but these guys tonight are going to show us how that's done. So a few housekeeping topics here. First, thanks for registering. We really appreciate everybody that comes out to these webinars. This session is being recorded. All of your video and your audio has been muted and your video is off, just so we don't have those interruptions. But there will be ways for you to contact us. So if you want to do any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen where you'll be able to type in a question. If you have any comments during the presentation, there's also a chat box, and that's usually, again, found at the bottom of your screen. So using that chat function, you can type something in that everybody can see. Now, if you want to ask a question out loud, there's a little raise hand button, and go ahead and click on that. And Agnes and I will be watching for those raised hands, and we'll interrupt these guys and say, hey, somebody wants to chat with you, so wants to ask you a question. So that's how we'll handle that. So you get continuing education credits for this. Each webinar earns 1 CEU per session. We've got 8 sessions, so you could pick up 8 hours worth of CEUs. And certificates will be submitted to each state's logger program and emailed to participants within 1 week of the session. Now, one of the things to keep in mind here is, if you're, a registered or a master logger in separate states, you're only going to get the certificate for the ones that you included your logger number on. So make sure you include your logger number for the different states. We still have a couple more sessions after this one, upcoming classes. October 26th, we have logger insurance and risk management. And on November 30th, truck accidents and other casualty claims. How do we win in those situations? So again, the next month's webinar, October 26th, 6:30 to 8 on risk management and logging insurance. So be sure to come next week. And I'll throw it out there and see if anybody has any questions before we get started. Agnes, are you seeing any questions coming up?
I don't see any questions, no.
All righty then. With that, I'm going to introduce today's speakers. So got a couple of featured fellows here with us today. We've got Randy Klum from Klum Forestry Consultants, and we have David Hirschberger from Hillcrest Lumber. And a little bit about these guys. Randy spent several years as a state forester here in Ohio before deciding to venture out and create his own consulting company. Actually, he and his wife formed Klum Forestry Consultants, and they both have a tremendous amount of forestry experience, working, for the state of Ohio and also for themselves. Beyond that, Randy is also a tree farmer, and Randy and his wife were the state tree farmers of the year a few years back, and actually made it all the way to the national level, and they were the National Tree Farmers of the Year just a couple of years ago. So he's got a lot of experience in both, the technical aspect of things, but also in owning woodlands and managing it. David Hirschberger from Hillcrest Lumber, their family's in the logging and sawmill business. He's been in our master logger program here in Ohio for several years, and again was was Ohio's Logger of the Year a few years back, and he and his company are well known for doing great logging jobs. But at the same time, David is very much into deer management, and they own properties, and he's done a great job with forestry and deer management there, and loves to share that information with us. So with that, guys, I'm going to unshare my screen and let you guys take it away. It's all yours.
All righty. You hear us okay?
Yep.
Very good. Well, as Brad said, my name's Randy Klum, and since David and I both work in Ohio pretty much, we just want to introduce you to the region we work in You think of Ohio as being a relatively small urbanized state. We're roughly 28, 29 million acres in size. We're 35th in size in the United States, but we rank 7th in population. We have about 11.7 million people. In Ohio, we have highly competitive land uses, but we still have about 8 million acres of forest land in Ohio. Roughly 30% is forested. And of that, which David and I work with primarily, 85, 86% is privately owned. So that's about 6.8 million acres. So in our area, we're in East Central Ohio, about midway between Cleveland and Marietta off of I-77, basically. We have a plethora of sawmills. David's one we work with quite a bit, but we're lucky to have all these sawmills in our region. To give you a dichotomy of ownership besides private, we have 24 state forests in Ohio. It's roughly 200,000 acres, 74 state parks. We have one national forest in Ohio, one national park, and altogether, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources owns about 640,000 acres. So that's kind of a drop in the bucket compared to a lot of other states. But what we really want to delve into is, does forest management and deer management coexist, or can they complement each other? So I think one of the benefits of really forest management, if you think about it, is what we have in our ownership, if we own property, is we own an appreciating asset. And with that, how can we be responsible stewards, and how can we increase the value of our asset? And one of the ways we can do that is through good forest management, through timber stand improvement, crop tree release, controlling invasives. There's a whole host of things to do. David is the guy I look to for deer management. I think his neck starts to swell in November. I'll leave it at that. But,
Yeah.
David has several properties, and you could share with us what you're into, David.
Yeah, well, what I'm kind of passionate about is a little bit what Randy was saying, is the combining the two management things, because and I think you can attest to this, what we're asked a lot to do is come into a property and, cut a lot of the trees down, or too many of the trees down, to create an insane amount of cover, because
A brushy environment.
right.
Mhm.
Because the philosophy kind of is for a lot of deer hunters is that, if cover is good, then lots of cover is better. And and that is, in my mind, absolutely not the case.
I would agree.
Yeah, because there's simply from a pure hunting standpoint, there's areas you don't want the deer to be,
Right.
and there's areas you want the deer to be. So if you put a strategic plan together from a hunting standpoint and also from a forestry standpoint, a lot of times I think those can coexist,
Right. I would
in a
agree.
good way. But
Right.
it takes some planning to do that.
Right.
And yeah.
Well, David and I have done what I call some road shows at different sportsman events, and tried to educate the public about proper forest management, and maybe more of a fine tuning aspect instead of just creating a brushy jungle out there. Put some thought into it, as David said, have a strategic plan developed. I mean, we do that for our clients too, as far as in Ohio, we have a couple of tax laws where they can get tax benefits if they have a written forest management plan and follow it. And so we like to have a written forest management plan as well. So they have a roadmap. The landowner has a roadmap to follow to accomplish their goals and objective as ownership. So, and that's who we're working for, basically, is the landowner. And once you understand their goals and objectives, then you can effectively give them a working, I'd call it a flexible management plan, where they can continually update it as their goals and objectives change. Because as they become educated, they have more questions, and that's where it starts to really become fun, because then you can delve into it deeper. But it's an interesting process. I don't remember how many properties you have, but you aggressively manage those both for timber and wildlife.
Right.
And it's, to me, it's fun to see the changes of a piece of property as you institute proper forest management.
Yeah.
On our property, it's relatively small. We only have 152 acres. And like most hill country in East Central Ohio and parts of the Appalachian Plateau, a lot of the flatter areas were farmed. And up until the 60s, part of our farm was barren. And in the 60s, they started to plant evergreens and for Christmas trees. But since 2004, on those areas with some timber stand improvement, we've been actually selling trees off of those areas as far as the faster growing tulip poplar, red maple, cherry. And we've just been trying to incorporate proper forest management. And to me, it's gardening on a large scale.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, the kind of the hot topic has been for the last probably 10, 15 years is a term we call hinge cutting.
Yes.
And that is
Yes.
cutting into a tree and tipping it over. And what that does is it keeps that tree alive for 2 years, maybe 10 years, and creates food and creates horizontal cover that you're going to get underneath to bed in, just creates cover. And like we're prone to do, us humans take a good thing and we overdo it. You know, we think a little bit of hinge cutting is good, so a lot is better, and we just hinge cut a lot of our properties without thinking about what we're trying to accomplish. And a lot of times what we're trying to do is we're just trying to create pockets of cover where a deer will feel comfortable spending the day bedded. He wants some cover. They don't want too much cover. If there's too much cover, they don't feel comfortable. They can't even walk through it. If me or Randy can't crawl through it, a deer can't either. And we, like I said, we have a tendency to overdo that and to not have a plan on where we're doing it. You know, we should create bedding areas in places where we want the deer to be from a hunting standpoint.
And you pointed out to me several years ago, and I've been picking up on that. I'm not a deer hunter anymore. I hunt with my chainsaw at my farm. So I kind of gave up on hunting. But what David really stressed is if there's a small level spot, that's where the deer want to be. They want to be on a relatively level area, and time in, time out, you're
It has to be
you're
completely
spot on.
level.
Right.
It has to be completely
Right.
level, yes.
Right. So, and that's what I've been noticing. The other thing is the windage is so important. And most of you guys probably know this because most of you guys deer hunt. I should say people, not guys. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, they want the wind at their backs, a swirling wind situation, and they want a flat area where they got downwind visibility, you know, especially in the hills we're in. That's what they prefer. And also does and bucks have different preferences of where to bed based on where the food's at. The females, they like to bed close to food because they have babies. And if you don't create enough good bedding areas for them close to food, then there's no place for the buck, which likes to bed. The old buck likes to bed by himself. Like I keep saying, they don't like Tupperware parties. Right.
You also mentioned the slope position. They like that south facing slope because of the sunshine, and
Right.
particularly the old guys like us, we like to be warm in the winter time.
Right.
So, but one of the things that's so important is where communication is valuable. It's a team effort, or good forest management wouldn't get done. So it starts with the landowner. I like to include the forester, the sawmill, and then without the guys on the ground, you folks out there, the sawyers, skidder operators, the truck drivers. I mean, it's a team effort, and we're only as good as our weakest link. And that's what I think is so enjoyable, is that team effort. And the better job we can do as a team, the better we're going to look in the public's eye, because the public, to me, is so ignorant about what we do. I mean, they're so far removed from the production end of any product they consume anymore. It's just, we're comfortable communicating among ourselves, and we need to get out of our comfort zone, stretch ourselves to explain to people, actually, we're the environmentalists, we're the conservationists, we're the stewards, we're the wildlife managers. I mean, it's clean air, clean water, sequestering carbon. It's just good forest management is a win-win for the environment as well as those four-legged critters and two-legged critters and anything with wings. So we have a great responsibility, but it goes beyond just the physical work on the ground. It's communications as well.
Yeah. And on the hinge cutting thing, one thing that we've found is you can use it to release your crop trees.
There you go.
And what's kind of cool about it, I found that the best tree for me to hinge cut is a red maple.
Right.
For a couple of reasons. Number one thing, a lot of times those are the trees that need to get away from your oak trees and such. And deer absolutely love the browse. And because what we're trying to create not only a bedding area, but I always say it's a bed and breakfast. A deer wants to bed somewhere, kind of like Randy. He likes to lay somewhere where he not only gets a nap, but he has a short little, trot to the refrigerator. So.
Or a donut and a coffee,
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're doing two things at once.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that too, that there's a higher success rate on red maple to hinge cut. And also they sprout so much better and the deer just love them.
Mm-hmm.
And beech is another one, but they don't go after the sprouting aspects of beech nearly like they do red maple.
But it is fun to use a beech to create a deer bed because you're helping both sides of the ground there. Yeah.
So the two things those two tree species have in common is they're both shade tolerant. They'll grow under the shade of other trees, as most of us know. But and that also holds back some of our more desirable and valuable species, particularly the oaks. And the thing that's come into prominence or really into focus in the last couple of years is this thing called the White Oak Initiative. I don't know how many folks out there have heard about it, but it's kind of been initiated by the distilleries in Kentucky and surrounding states, and they're looking down the road 30 to 100 years as far as, do we have that resource in the land base to continue our operations? And as we all know, white oak, the price has just gone crazy.
Yeah.
Just in the last, year or so, really, it's really picked up here in Ohio, and I'm sure it has in our neighboring states and in the mid-Atlantic as well. But it's also, as we know, the most light demanding species out there. It's one of the favorite as far as wildlife species. The white oak acorn is to me the apex acorn out there in the woods, and they just gobble those things up. But what I'm surprised is a lot of people don't know it. On white oak, it's a 1 year for the acorns to mature, and as soon as those acorns start falling on the ground, they're going to send out a radical within a couple of weeks, and all that energy stored in that acorn is going to be used up. So as a hunter, I'm thinking I'm going to hunt over my white oak stands in the fall while they're in there gobbling them up, and I can hunt over the red oaks the rest of the hunting season. And it's the tannic acid content. White oak has lower tannic acid than the red oak group. And as the red oak age on the ground, they tend to lose that tannic acid. But
so they get better for the deer as
that's correct. It gets a little sweeter for them, I guess you could say.
But I see that, and it's cool how that's designed.
Right.
The white oak they prefer. They eat them early, and then they leave the red oak, black oak, scarlet oak for winter food. It's a great winter food for them. I see that all the time. It's pretty cool how that works.
Yeah. So it's paramount to know that the white oak would germinate in the fall.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I've been listening a lot on there's a white oak initiative site on the internet, and it's basically 17 states plus or minus, and Ohio is one of those states. And the National Wild Turkey Federation is big behind it, as are the distillers. And they're saying that white oak is the most ecological important oak species in the forest, if not the most important tree in the entire forest ecosystem. So as woodland owners, woodland stewards, and the people who care for the woods, we need to be mindful of this resource and how can we help it along. So I think that's just one of our tasks as managers, owners, and harvesters, sawmillers. It's a team effort. So I think it's going to be a big thing now and in the future. I mean, for years to come. I can remember how big cherry was up until the last recession. I mean, we rode that horse until the crash in 2007 and 8.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
a long time.
And
Yeah.
what I'm afraid of, if we don't manage the regeneration of white oak, we're really going to be in a hurt. So there's going to be a big educational push in this area. I'm talking about 17 state area to manage white oak.
Mhm.
Yeah. So getting back to deer, when will they? How long does it? What's the gestation period on the deer, Dave?
7.5 months.
7.5 months.
Yeah, the bulk of them are bred in early to mid-November.
Right.
And then
Right.
they'd be, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
When your neck starts to swell.
My neck starts to swell.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
We'll leave it at that. So we were trying to figure out how we could situate our computer so you could see some of the fine deer they've harvested off their properties. And it's just amazing the process or the evolution of the deer if you just kind of provide the habitat, the cover habitat,
Right.
and then let them get past 3.5 years.
Mhm.
It's just amazing. We have some, every state's proud of their deer herd, turkey herd, the way they manage wildlife, but we have some fantastic bucks in this state.
And what it does, you know, when you create what they want, when you give them, like we talk, like a bed and breakfast where they have food, where they bed, and they have good transition cover, and they have easy access to food and water and all that. What it does, it creates an environment that's not stressful to them. They're healthy, they're relaxed, they move around in the daytime, and that's of course an advantage to the hunter, and it's more healthy for the deer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Well, some of the techniques besides hinge cutting is, and I think you practice on your property as well. I do it on mine, is a thing called crop tree release, where we identify potential crop trees. Most of this work was done by Arlen Perky and Brenda Wilkins, and they were with the U.S. Forest Service out of Morgantown, West Virginia. And Arlen also has private property, and he's a firm believer in it, and I am too. And I think you are too, David.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
you identify your crop trees, and again, what is a crop tree? And it goes back to the landowner as far as what are their goals and objectives and priorities of ownership. So it could be, some crop trees could be, people love fall color. So what can we do to promote?
It can be a persimmon.
Right.
That's what I'm doing right now. Yeah.
Right.
You identified some persimmon
Right.
property, and I go through every year and keep opening them up.
Right. I think
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you let your brothers eat the ones that aren't hardened off before the first
green
frost,
ones.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
But yeah, it could be fall color, could be persimmons. It could, and I look at it, how can I increase my asset? How can I increase my rate of return? How can I increase my percent of return or my interest on my investment? So I'm through good crop tree release, particularly the oaks and other hard mass or even soft mass producing trees, good forest management will benefit the wildlife. My philosophy is cut it and they will come.
Right.
So
Well, wouldn't you agree? Good forest management, you're creating a different age groups of trees.
There you
It's
go.
just
Yes.
it's like
Yes.
a herd of deer.
Right.
You want the different age groups.
Right.
You want your old mature deer. You want
Right.
your middle aged deer. You
Right.
want your young deer.
And you want to harvest them though before they're over mature.
That's right.
Yeah, we have two maturities in the forest. We have biological maturity and then financial maturity. And financial maturity is at its peak. Biological maturity is when it's about ready to fall over. What do you see as far as your optimum size? What do you like coming in at the mill?
Well,
Right.
it varies per species.
Right.
You know, it varies. It's smaller than it used to be. There's more thin lumber cut than
Right.
there used to
Right.
be years ago.
Different
So,
utilizations.
yes.
Right.
Yes.
Flooring's big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you take a sugar maple. We don't like them very big.
Yeah.
You know, we like them to stay nice and a nice color too. We like them
White with a little brown spot.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then a white oak we like a little bigger.
Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
blame you.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about white oaks. We were in Kentucky a few years ago at a tree farm convention, and we had Brown Foreman, some other distillers there. and their rate of production as far as barrels is just skyrocketing. I think Brown-Forman alone was going to increase their capacity by 3 million barrels. So a barrel is 53 gallons. And if I remember correctly, 50 board feet in a barrel. So we have only 2 cooperage mills in Ohio, and I know one's producing like 750 a shift, 1,500 a day. So, you know, that's quite a drain on that particular species. So that's why I keep harping about this white oak initiative and be cognizant and mindful of how we affect those small trees. We used to run over a lot of them, but I think through education and the use of equipment and the skill of our guys in the woods, you folks out there, I'm just so impressed with the job that gets done out there anymore. But we have to identify those smaller white oaks so we can have that product continually on the marketplace. Plus, it's a really valuable tree in our pocketbook and on payday too. I mean, it just benefits everybody. So one of the things I do see though as a problem with opening up the woods, and I think the further south you go, the more aggressive it gets, is invasive species. We have a ton of them here in Ohio. We can keep kudzu on the other side of the Ohio River as far as I'm concerned, but when you start opening up the forest, letting more sunlight down to the forest floor, we do get a lot of invasives. And a lot of them you can do mechanically, but some of them you can't do without chemicals. And David made a comment, if a little bit is good, then a lot is better. And some people take that with herbicides as well. And there's a reason there's a label on there, so you get the most effective use of the chemicals, because chemicals are expensive and you don't want to put any more out in the environment that's absolutely necessary. But I know you've been quite aggressive on your properties and you getting rid of invasives, but part of it's identifying them. So that's part of our educational process as well, is identifying invasive species.
Right.
Yeah. I know one, my public enemy number one is the tree of heaven, stink tree Ailanthus altissima, whatever you want to call it. You know, we have male and female trees, only the females have the seeds. And the bad thing about Ailanthus is we really do not know how long the seeds will remain viable or good in the seed bed or the forest floor. So, and if you cut them without a herbicide, you're just asking 100 of its closest friends to show up at its funeral. You just trigger that sprouting mechanism in it. So I nuke mine. I use a tripapir chemical with a diesel fuel carrier, and it just keeps them from resprouting. It's very effective. But yeah, right chemical in the right place at the right time. And there's all kinds of fact sheets out there from your extension service, which is very helpful as far as the right chemical at the right time and the right dosage. So,
okay, we're at 7:02.
Yep.
Yeah.
So some of the things, again, in Ohio, and I imagine some of you folks have it as well, is we tend to get we need to educate some of our local officials as far as county engineer, township trustees, and trucking issues. I see that becoming somewhat of a problem. And you think, well, what's that got to do with forest management? Well, if you can't gain access, or if you have to use a road maintenance agreement, some of the engineers here in Ohio want us to do that. It's an educational process. A lot of our elected officials, county, state, and township do not recognize forestry as an agricultural product.
Right.
And they tend to discriminate against our log trucks day in and day out. So it's an educational process as well there. And I think Brad and our Ohio Forestry Association's done a tremendous job stepping up to the plate and helping us out. Because whenever I have an issue, it's like Brad's probably thinking, oh, it's Randy again. What's his problem? But access is paramount. when it comes to the logging industry and carrying out good forest management. The other thing I will say too is the decking area, the roads to the decking area, the reclamation process, that's just as important as far as our calling card and what the public sees, what we leave behind. So the better jobs we do of buttoning up on the reclamation process, getting cover on those areas quicker, the better we all look. And I know, even though each state's similar, each state has its own reclamation laws, BMP practices. And if you see somebody out there that slacking off a little bit, we're all a part of the industry, and it's all up to us to make us all look good. Like I said earlier, we're only as good as our weakest link. So, and David, you're using low impact machines. You have that high track dozing skidder that just is amazing. And I imagine everybody's experiencing the same things, that winter is becoming more consistently inconsistent because we just don't get the freeze ups like we used to.
Mhm.
So we got to work smarter than harder, and using the right equipment.
And we
at the
use
right
that machine
time.
a lot to create better deer hunting for people.
Yeah. Now, how do you do that?
Well, we can clear for small food plots. And that's another thing I guess I can mention is, you know, my opinion, the best way to utilize food plots is what I call a coffee table. It's a small food plot on the way to where the deer actually wants to feed. So you don't have to make these 5-acre clearings.
Right.
I think it should just be a 1/4 acre clearing,
Right.
or path out too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, your oaks, your white oak is the apex tree as far as sunlight. I find my best oak regeneration on those old worn out farm fields that reverted back to woods. And then the other places, obviously, and you folks should know that too, is on the south or southwest portion of the slope. White oak likes those drier sites because there's not as much competition. And our computer's acting up. There we go. So, but yeah, I have been blessed to be in this business for over 40 years, and knowing people like David, it's just you can't find better people than the people we work with in
We
the
are
woods.
truly blessed here.
Right.
Yeah.
And the landowners in general are pretty good. I mean, every once in a while you run into a rotten egg, but usually you find out over the phone or in person that it's somebody you do or do not want to work with. And what I find is that our folks in the woods are our representatives when David or I aren't there. Because a cool, calm person that listens on the ground and doesn't overreact is the best person we can have in the woods. There we go. We're getting a little shake here.
I think it's you.
Oh,
No, I'm just kidding.
okay. Very good.
You guys are coming in fine. Everything on
Okay.
this end looks good. So
Okay,
just to
good.
let you know.
It was just getting a little shudder to it. One thing I want to say is, as we are stewards of the forest, I always look at the health and the vigor of the forest, because a lot of people will say, well, how do you decide which trees to cut? And I said, a lot of times the forest will tell you what needs to be done if you're aware of it. And I'm looking on our property, besides increasing our investment value, I'm looking at, well, how can I make my woods healthier, more resilient? Because we don't know what's going to come out of the next cargo container as far as insect or disease. And the healthier we can make our woods, the more resilient, I'm not going to use the word climate change, but to different climatic factors, different stresses that are placed on the woods, the healthier they're going to be in the long run. So to me, trees are just one giant solar cell or solar panel. And by opening up those tops and increasing the amount of green space, more photosynthetic material, not only do the trees make more sugar and food for themselves, we get that byproduct of oxygen, but we get more flowers. More flowers mean more seeds, acorns, whatever it could be.
Yeah.
So, and the timing of the flowering in the springtime is paramount as far as to the success of our seed crops. And I don't know, we have a big white oak tree in our front yard, and I'm always scooping up those acorns and throwing them out in the woods just to help nature along, because sometimes it's not as consistent as you would like to see it. In our open grown white oak in the front yard, it's still got a beautiful, to me, veneer log, since it's my tree and I'm
Your
selling
tree's
it.
been out, yeah.
But it produces, I think, good genetic qualities. And that's another thing that was pointed out to me by some older foresters, that maybe we cut our best genetics out, cutting our barns, our buildings,
Mhm.
and also they were also the highest value trees.
I bet we did.
Yeah. So a lot of times we have to think about genetics. Is there a lot of epicormic branching or side branches on that white oak, and why does it have those? Is it genetic runt or dud? But again, I like to focus on the white oak on my property and try and release them. I just see big dividends on my personal property, and we've only owned it since '93, and we've been through 5 hardwood timber sales. You guys have done 2 of them. And from what we started with, just that appreciating asset nature of our property is just phenomenal. We have more board feet growing than when we started on fewer trees. And that's the beauty of it. The other thing about it, and that's what I like about David's group, is they're always planning their roads. If you don't have a road system built, it gets expensive to harvest trees. So we have an existing road system. And if you do it right the first time, you won't have to rebuild your roads. I know we've all seen maybe our parents, grandparents, or great grandparents where they didn't choose the right terrain to put a road in, maybe straight up and down the hill. But today we have that knowledge, and some of those old roads we just need to clear off, close off, and build new roads that will last as long as it's producing timber. Yeah, it's just a fantastic resource we get to work with. I try and speak to as many people as will listen. Last night I spoke to some 6th graders from another county away. We have the Paul Bunyan Show in Ohio coming up this weekend. A lot of our Division of Forestry people will be there. I know Brad will be there, but it's an opportunity to speak to people and educate them about our forest resource here in the state of Ohio, as well as in the nation and in our region. So anything you'd like to add on that, David?
Not really.
You're a great educator, though, too, with your clients.
And I'm going to be at the Paul Bunyan Show.
Oh, good.
Speaking.
Well, you can buy me lunch.
I don't buy you lunch.
You don't buy me lunch.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to buy you lunch.
No, I guess the big thing I want to end with is just that we need to plan. If we want to take care of our forests and if we want to manage for deer, we need to think about it,
Right.
or get somebody to help us.
Right.
Get a forester or a guy that knows what he's doing to help
Right.
us.
Or a combination of people.
Right.
Right.
That's right.
Because we've been on properties together, and it's just fun to bounce ideas off of each other. And it's a teamwork approach. A lot of times is better than a single person.
Right. And not to be arrogant, but probably 80% of the hinge cuts that I see walking around are in the wrong place.
Yeah.
They just are.
Yeah.
And it's just from lack of planning.
Right.
I don't think we're smarter than most people. You just have to plan.
Well, you might be.
So,
Shoot.
yeah.
But it's been a great experience. Brad, do you have something for us?
Yeah, guys, got a couple things here.
Fire away.
First off, there's a question here that Ben Spong put out here.
Oh, yeah.
Says there's lots of great tips here about how to attract deer. What happens when you have too many deer? And do you have some hints or suggestions on how to encourage desirable species into the overstory and not in the deer bellies?
Too many deer, there's really only one thing to do is shoot them.
Lead poisoning
Yeah.
or arrows.
But on the other side of that, I think sometimes by creating just an unbelievable amount of cover all through our property, we're kind of sometimes holding too many deer.
Right,
That can be part of it.
right. But
You know,
that can be solved too with the doe situation,
yeah.
the old mother doe. And,
Yeah. And you know,
thinning that.
if you get rid of the old mother doe, the young, and we're of course aiming for the males, they will stay there. If when that button buck gets to a year and a half old, the mother kicks him out and he'll move a mile or two away. If you kill her, you can get her young to stay there.
What was the other part of the question, Brian?
So that first part was, what do you do when you have too many deer? The second one was, do you have some hints or suggestions on how to encourage desirable species into the overstory and not into the deer? In other words, they're not being browsed off, but they're actually making it into the overstory.
Well, some of it can be through the use of hinge cutting, actually, or take a little bit more manpower, but to rearrange some of the tops, or to make it an impediment or make it harder for the deer to get to the desirable regeneration you're trying to promote. And I see that a lot in after a harvest, a lot of tops, you'll see a lot of oaks coming up, particularly after a good acorn crop. And we've had some fantastic red oak acorn crops this last year. But a lot of them, the tops will protect a lot of the young. I don't see a whole lot of browse though on young regeneration if there's other desirable things for the deer to feed on or to browse on.
I don't see that as a problem on
Yeah.
our tree farms.
But
So that kind of feeds into a little bit of another question there. Somebody
Sure.
asked, what are some techniques a logger can use to protect seedlings from deer browse after a harvest? So you're almost saying if you have the right other food sources, that
yes,
might protect them after a harvest.
I see yellow poplar and red maple are just fantastic browse materials. And black gum
Black
is
gum
is a big sleeper, and nobody likes to, well, I shouldn't say anybody, nobody, but black gum, as we all know, is not the highest desirable thing to bring into the log yard, but deer will just browse the heck out of black gum sprouts. And you'll see an old black gum, a big old tree, and you'll just see it looks like a bad haircut underneath where the deer will just browse that like crazy. And I've seen them browse on greenbrier and multiflora rose and you name it, they'll browse on it. But if you can create, if you have the species of maple, they'll browse on cherry some, but
Yeah.
it seems like yellow poplar and particularly red maple, they sprout so easy. They're
They do.
great browsers. Yeah, it's just really good. And when I have black gum on my property, since it's such a kind of a dud in the lumber market, I'll cut mine to encourage them to sprout just for deer browse. What else you got, Brad?
Another question is, what about leaving tops on the land after a harvest?
Well, in our contract, we always state the tops is the property of the landowner. And that's due to primarily so someone, maybe through the sawmill or the timber harvester, doesn't sell the tops to some unknown person. But we don't like moving tops anymore, and we have to, because then you start damaging the residual trees you're trying to save. And the worst time, and I'm sure most people out there know this, when you start moving tops in the springtime, yellow poplar in particular, the bark just seems to jump off the trees.
Yeah, you don't want to be moving tops.
Right.
No.
So we had one client, he wanted to windrow the top so he could drive his deer into his stand. And it's like, we're not going to do that. If you can find somebody to do that, good for you. But when you start moving tops, to me, you're asking for trouble. The only time we move tops is to keep the trails open for the landowner if they're a high use owner. How's that?
So couple other questions here
Sure.
directed towards landowners. So Agnes asked one here: how do you convince a landowner to keep the other species to divert deer from the oaks? So you were mentioning gum, for instance, but how do you convince landowners to keep some of those other species to divert them from eating the oaks?
To me, it's an educational process. When you walk through, we encourage landowners to walk through the woods if they're able, and if not, we'll sit down in their house and talk about their goals and objectives. And if deer is a big management concern and I have questions, I'll consult somebody like David or our wildlife biologist in our area, Ryan Jackson, to get their input. But to me, it's an educational process as far as saying, this is what I would do, and this is what I do on my personal property to encourage browse from the deer not browsing what I want them not to browse on, if that makes any sense. But it can be done, and I find success at our property. I mean, I don't get a whole lot of browse on my white oak at all.
I don't at all.
Yeah.
You know, but we do a lot of hinge cutting and
Right,
stuff like that
right.
with the red maples and
Right.
stuff, and they seem to just nibble. They do a lot on
Right.
the roses and the
Right.
greenbrier.
I do not use hinge cutting on my own property. But what I do is encourage the maples to resprout when I cut them. Yellow poplar, the crummy yellow poplar, soft maple, and black gum as well.
So another landowner directive question for both of you.
Sure.
So you've both done a lot of work on your own properties. I know you and your tree farm, David's got a lot of properties. You've been able to experiment, so to speak, with your forest management, your deer management on those properties. How's it being received when you talk to a landowner that wants a harvest done or is interested in deer management, when you start talking to them about some of the techniques maybe that David has mentioned of, how these smaller food plots and putting them in the right places and that type of thing, and managing your harvest correctly? How are other landowners receiving that?
I think with open arms. I mean, we got some amazing landowners here. And the other thing we have in our area is a great seed shop, Merit Seed over in Berlin. I mean, they're fantastic as far as doing custom mix, food plot mixes. David's got his own trail mix out there, the Hillcrest trail mix. But it's amazing how receptive people are. And I think in David's community, David's well respected. They look up to David as far as, well, tell us what you think we need to do, and they'll follow through on it. And I think you've had a huge impact in our area as far as getting people to back off and being overzealous as far as making their woods too brushy, and incorporating what you recommend as far as hinge cutting, food plots, location of food plots, location of hinge cutting, and blinds and
Right.
stands set up.
Right.
I think we have some really sharp landowners here.
Yes, and we have more, like in our community, there's more and more landowners also more educated in just the forestry part of it and
Right.
passionate about
Right,
it.
right,
Atlee Kaufman,
Right,
some other people
right.
like that.
Influential
Yeah.
leaders in
Yeah.
the community.
Yeah.
And what I like to see is when you assign them a task and they call you back up and say, well, give me another task to do. I mean, they're out there ready to do it. Hands-on. And I think that's the best way, because when people do it themselves, I mean, a small project, they get excited and they can see the fruits of their labor. They have that sweat equity involved into their property. And it's just, I think it blossoms.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I'm not seeing any other questions out there. Give folks here a couple of seconds. Oh, wait a minute. I do see Ben's asking one. Are there any tips on how to safely hinge cut?
Well, yeah. First off, I think safety is paramount, and we can thank the experienced wood operators for that. And don't go into the woods without your safety gear, whether it's chaps, pants, hard hat. We have one cooperator, and you just bought his timber. We won't mention his name, but I'll just use his first name. Kenny has developed a iron metal pole with, it's like a huge gaff hook or a hook on the end of it. And when they start to cut the tree, make their opening cut, he'll pull it over just as a safety thing. So
Yeah,
that's something I've never seen before. I
yeah,
thought that
yeah,
was pretty
yeah.
cool.
There's different people doing it. That's the safest way to do it is two people. But,
Right,
you know,
right.
that happens with in my end about 20% of the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually it's a one-man show because
A big thing in my mind is be careful which species you cut. There's
Right,
some trees
right.
that are not safe to cut.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Yeah.
Ironwood is it's just so dense and doesn't cooperate. But when you get those longer fibers, elm's a good one too.
Like I got an aspen.
Yeah,
It's-
aspen. Yeah, that's so. I don't know if that answers Ben's question or not, but that's how I look at it.
Kind of a follow-up on that. Can you
Sure.
use a harvester or a processor to do some of that work?
Oh, I think you could.
Right, good.
Yeah. We have some cut the length things. Yeah, it just depends on. Yeah, I
What-
think you could.
What size trees are you usually hinge cutting?
Probably something less than 10, 12 inches.
I do a lot of smaller diameter.
Yeah, from
I-
4 inches and up,
Yeah.
up to
yeah.
maybe 10 or 12.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
that's pretty much what I see too, and those are the ones I know.
Well, and I just kind of ask, how do you do it safely if you don't have that gaff hook tool?
Well, then it's experience, and what I would do is get somebody that has experience doing that. And in our area, kind of proud of what we've done here in Ohio. We have landowner groups. I think is there 8 or 9 of them, Brad?
Yeah, there's 9.
Okay, and there's a lot of experience, knowledge, and resources in these landowner groups. I don't know if there's anything like that in our neighboring states or in this seminar, but a lot of those people have done that, and usually forest landowners are willing to help other forest landowners, and all you have to do is ask, and usually you receive their help.
And I would suggest, a lot of times what I'll do is just stick to smaller trees.
Yeah,
A
that's true.
deer really doesn't have to have a ceiling over top as long as
Right.
they have some cover.
Right.
So it can be a 2, 3, 4-inch tree.
Right. Right.
In which case, a lot of the safety concerns are taken away by doing really small
Right.
trees that you can.
I actually do a lot with a good German-made handsaw.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Smaller trees.
saw them, pull them over.
Yeah.
What the other cool thing I saw was I was out with a landowner, and he had what was called a battery powered pruning saw. It's like a mini chainsaw.
Mhm.
And for older folks or people with limited ability, that might be the way to go for them.
I think Still just come out with one.
Yeah, still does. And there's
Yeah.
a lot of off brands too, but they're fairly inexpensive, as far as an entry into your arsenal of wood product or TS timber stand improvement products. And I could see a lot of use out of something like that. But again, since it's battery powered and there's a lot of torque in that, you have to be really careful with that because it'll go right through your chaps.
Wear a hard hat.
Yeah, wear a hard hat. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, guys, thank you so much. A lot of great information. A little different than some of the other topics we've had, but really enjoyed it. You guys do a good job of disseminating that information. Not sure. Oh, wait a minute. I do have another question. Just popped in.
Sure, fine.
Any suggestions on how many hinge cuts per acre?
That's a good question. There's a lot of variables there, so it's hard to say, X amount per acre because it depends on the density of your stand and the past land use or ag practices on it too.
But just for me as a deer hunter, it depends on where it's at. If I'm close to food, where I want to get all my does to bed,
You
I
mean
would
food like a food plot?
like a food plot or a crop field. If I'm close to that, I'm putting probably 4 or 5 of them per acre.
And
So I'd rather have a bunch of little ones to hold a bunch of different doe groups to get them to bed close to food. So I got room for my loner mature bucks on the back end of my property.
Excellent. Excellent. give it another 30 seconds here. We can BS. Let's see if anybody throws a last minute question in there. We're just a couple minutes before an hour anyway.
Well, I'm going to put a plug in for you, Brad, and the Paul Bunyan Show. If you want to see some excellent entertainment, hardware, ironware, and meet some interesting folks, October 1st through the 3rd, Old Washington Fairgrounds in Guernsey County, or the Guernsey County Fairgrounds in Old Washington. Come join us. It's a great way to segue to meet people, and there's going to be a lot of vendors there. So thank you, Brad, for putting this on for us.
Yeah, no problem, Randy, and thanks for the plug there. And I did put a link out there in the chat room for everybody that can get all the details on the Paul Bunyan Show. It's one of the oldest and biggest logging trade shows in the Midwest and Eastern United States. And so I've been spending my week out there getting stuff set up and ready to go. So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, beautiful weather this year. It's going to be a great show.
Yes.
So everybody's welcome. All right, well, guys, with that, I'm going to thank you guys. Great presentation, really appreciate it. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I know there are several loggers out there sitting in on this webinar tonight. Appreciate that very much. Don't forget there'll be another webinar, a month from now. It's the 4th Tuesday of the month. And Agnes and I were talking earlier about getting our group together and see if we want to extend these into the coming winter time. So look for more information on us, coming out from us on that. So thank everybody. If there's no other questions or anything come up, Agnes, do you have anything else you want to say before we end the webinar?
You know me well, Brad. There's always something Agnes has to say.
No problem.
Just kidding. You guys, I appreciated this format. I like the discussion format. I think that this was great to kind of have hearing foresters, harvesters talk about harvesting and harvesting. So I appreciate you guys joining us today. And seconds, if you want to jump in, you can join this crowd. I wish I was closer to go to the Paul Bunyan Show.
Well, it's every first full weekend in October. You can plan an event for next year.
Next year.
It's a good place to come over for a weekend. You can camp there. We have camping there on site, or a lot of other good places in the area. So
sounds like we got to get a carpool ready for next year, eh, Maryland? What do you think, Maryland? I think we could carpool out there.
Yeah, you Delmarva people come over and visit us.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you joining us. That was great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks, Brad, for hosting tonight too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Randy and Dave.
You bet.
Take care.
Yep.
Thanks, Agnes.
You're welcome. I guess
Appreciate it.
everybody.